Obamacare and replace it with common sense reforms. Can't speak for what will happen in the Senate, and I don't want to speak for what President Obama may or may not do with that bill. But you can probably imagine. Secondly, there were $550 billion worth of Medicare cuts in the health care bill. Let me tell you, if there were $550 billion to save in Medicare, why wouldn't we use it to save Medicare instead of taking it from Medicare that doesn't have it and starting a brand new entitlement program? And so I would repeal the $550 billion worth of Medicare cuts. And let's see how many votes that bill gets in the House and Senate. Thirdly, they're going to need money from the Congress to hire what we think are up to 22,000 new federal employees to run this monstrosity. And I can just assure you there will not be one dime from this Congress to expand this. When I say that we're going to do everything to make sure that this law does not go into effect, I mean we will do everything. Is that clear? Good.
Yes, sir. And then this gentleman up front, and then I'm going to move over this way.
I'm Mark Thiessen from the American Enterprise Institute. I appreciate your personal opposition to earmarks and your leadership in getting the Republican conference to adopt a unilateral ban. You probably got a few fresh bruises in your chest in the process of doing that. But you had said that the decision will be one for the conference whether to continue that ban in the next Congress. The purpose of the pledge was to let people know in advance of the election what the Republicans are going to do when they get into power.
No. The pledge was about a legislative agenda that can be enacted now. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do everything we can. You've seen us over the last week do everything we can to implement as much of that pledge as we can implement today.
But I guess my question is, why wasn't the earmark ban in the pledge? And shouldn't people know before they go into the voting booth whether Republicans will continue the earmark ban?
Listen, as I said earlier, the pledge was about a legislative agenda that can be enacted today. Today, Republicans have unilaterally imposed an earmark moratorium on ourselves. And so for an agenda that can be implemented today, we've already taken care of today. There's an earmark moratorium in place. It will be up to the next Congress. But I am here to tell you that we are not going to see earmarks, as we've seen in the past, under a Republican majority if I'm the Speaker of the House.
Yes, sir. Then I'll move back.
Mr. Leader, Alan Meltzer, American Enterprise Institute in Carnegie Mellon. Most outsiders looking at the Congress see toxicity. I think you gave a great speech about reforms, most of which probably move us in the best direction. What can you do to bring the House back to where it was 50 years ago when people talked to each other, drank together, and so on?
Well, Alan, there's no question that there's a lot of scar tissue that's been built up on both sides of the aisle, and both parties are to blame. I do think that one of the ways that you begin this process is you open up the legislative process. If members in a committee understand that it's their bill that's going to the floor, and the committee chairman and ranking member understand it's their bill that they have to defend through the floor, that the leadership isn't going to waive the rules and bail them out, guess what? You're going to have more engaged legislators from both sides of the aisle. Secondly, when it comes to the floor, if there's a more open process and members are allowed to participate, guess what? It lets the steam out of the place. You know, today when you look at what's happening, there's about 5 people who determine the outcome of the legislative process. You know, the subcommittee chairman, the committee chairman, maybe the staff director, and the speaker and majority leader staff. That's it. 430 of us stand on the sidelines and watch, and we vote. I just think it's reprehensible. When people want to look up to us as the greatest legislative body in the history of the world, and if they actually see how it's working today, it won't surprise the American people. It may surprise those who haven't watched it as closely.
Good afternoon, Mr. Leader. Patrick Wilson with the Semiconductor Industry Association. We have about 200,000 employees in the United States, all high-tech people, all scientists. One of the things that you sort of touched on in your talk about oversight, classic role of the Congress. And unfortunately, for the last decade or so, oversight has been very partisan. The Democrats said they were going to go after Bush. Now, there are a lot of people in this town salivating about the fact that, oh, if you take the House, we're really going to get the Democrats. But clearly, in our sector, we use science to measure the outcome of these projects. If it's successful, you have the metrics to show it is. Can you maybe address the question of Congress's historic role as an oversight to the federal agencies that there's no doubt are killing jobs?
Listen, I used to be the chairman of a committee. My committee did oversight. I think we did effective oversight. It wasn't gotcha oversight. It wasn't about driving some political agenda. It was about getting to the bottom of how our program's working. I mean, I'll give you one great example. We were involved in an effort to bring real change to Head Start, to try to ensure that low-income kids had a better shot at high-quality early childhood development. We had a series of hearings to get to the bottom of what was happening in the Head Start program. And I thought, frankly, it helped us develop much better legislation. So when I'm talking about oversight here, I'm talking about having a set of standards. I'm talking about a uniform way to approach this. And it's not about going after somebody on politics. It's about getting to how we're spending the American people's money. Well, my point that I was making in the speech is that we don't spend enough time providing scrutiny to the money that we give to these agencies and how they spend it. I'll give you a perfect example. Let's look at the stimulus bill. You know, it's been around now for 20 months, and every single day there's some nightmare story coming out about how those funds are being spent. Where's the Congress? Why isn't the Congress holding these agencies accountable? You know, it's always easier to spend someone else's money. And I just think Congress has to begin to understand that we've got a solemn responsibility to our constituents to spend their money wisely on programs that work.
We're over our time. I'm going to try to fit in 2, maybe 3 more questions if we can. This lady here.
Hi, I'm Jay Newton-Small with Time Magazine. I wanted to know, you've come up with some proposals on how to balance the budget and get rid of some of the deficits. But how do you actually reduce the deficit by slashing taxes and refusing to touch the defense budget as well as anything having to do with seniors?
Listen, to balance the budget, Congress has to get its arms around the spending here in Washington, and we have to have a healthy economy that gets Americans working again so they can care for themselves and their families. And you can't have a healthy economy if you raise taxes on those that you expect to reinvest in the economy and to hire more people. And so I think the way forward is real clear. Get our arms around spending and do everything we can to ensure that we have a healthy economy that's putting Americans back to work.
Virginia, I think the biggest frustration that people have is to the trade deficit, the budget deficit, and the jobs, the unemployment. So, is the going
Why don't
on?
we start with a new mic here? All right, let's forget the mic.
You were saying frustration.
The frustration of not knowing information-wise what leads to those issues. The America Speaking Out thing is great. I really, really appreciate that. That, in combination with the Republican Party purifying itself, has restored a good deal of my faith. Most people are still getting their information from TV, as you know. I'm being 100% serious. Can you ask Roger Ailes to consider opening up 1 hour per week so that we fiscal conservatives can give the information to the population so the voter is educated, they go in there, and they'll pick the fiscal conservative.
Well, let me just say that I don't have regular conversations with Roger Ailes. And it certainly would be beyond my job description to suggest to him how to run his network. But I will say this. You think about 1994, and now think about 2010. In 1994, we had one radio talk show host in America that no one had ever heard of. We had one 24-hour news channel that just did raw news. Remember, it was pretty boring. We had an internet, but only a couple of geeks out in Palo Alto were using it. All right? There were no blogs. There were no Facebook, no MySpace, no YouTube. And when you think about where we are today in the information age, the American people are getting their news, in most cases, from entirely different sources. They did in 1994. No, almost half the American people choose to get their news off the internet, someplace, some way, shape, or form. And when you look at these studies about how people are informing themselves, they've got so many choices, so they're choosing where they want to get their information. I just think the explosion of information available to the American people is at the heart of the political rebellion that's going on in America as we speak, because they're getting more information about their Congress than they've ever gotten. And part of what I'm suggesting today is that more transparency and more openness will involve more Americans, which I think is a very healthy thing for our democracy.
My apologies to those who have been waiting patiently, but we have to get Leader Boehner back on his busy rounds. Leader Boehner, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.